Every Friday after work, four guys gather at the Rifleman restaurant. It's a post-mortem of the week and a chance to sort out the world's problems. After all, that's what pubs are for. Their names are Alex, Patty, Anthony, and Damien. It took a year before they realized they had the same initials as Athos, Porthos, Aramis, and D'Artagnan. Given the name of the local pub, they inevitably refer to themselves as the Four Musketeers. This seems easier than figuring out why Dumas' heroes were called the Three Musketeers plus one. After a couple pints of beer, the conversation turns to Cynthia. She has something of an office maid's job where they work, and she clearly has a much higher estimation of her status than her salary would suggest. She has to come down to the shop floor several times a day and always acts like she's some sort of manager, though it's all an act. Every night about 150 men take her to bed and have her until she passes out. It's just a shame she's never with them to enjoy it. Cynthia is flirtatious, flirty, wears short skirts, and shows off her stocking tops, and she punches any lower status man who tries to touch her in the face. One of them has already received a verbal warning, and the other a written warning. It seems like she's just looking for sexual harassment. So this is Cynthia, admired, lusted after, but not really loved. The Four Musketeers share their memories, mostly exaggerated, of a glimpse of the swallows. Damien sits back in his chair, sipping his beer and looking at them with a superior smirk. "You don't have anything to say?" "I do have something to say. I'm just waiting for you to finish fantasizing." Sounds interesting. Patty goes to the bar and brings another round. They take the lids off their pints and look at him expectantly. Damien starts. "Are you ready, class?" "Last Saturday, I went to a Halloween party at Nakamoto Enterprises. They have their own lounge and bar like we have here, but of course much swankier. Japanese companies are pouring money in. I don't usually get invited to these events." "Why, because you're black?" "No, because I don't work there, asshole. The party was just for their employees and partners. But a buddy whose wife works there came down with the flu for 48 hours, and he asked me to bring her along." Now, joking comments were unacceptable. The buddies' wives were untouchable. So the place was full of regular dressed yuppies. Everyone was drinking, although they called it a chain business, of course. And then there was an incident at one of the tables. Not everyone was paying attention, but I walked by on my way to the restroom. Spencer and Cynthia Norton were drinking at an office Halloween party with their friends Margaret and Larry. Margaret was dressed as a sexy witch, a short black dress with stockings open. Spencer felt awkward and regretted dressing up as Quasimodo. His hump was making him sweat. He managed to smile, however. This was Nakamoto's Halloween party, and he was determined to enjoy it. Next to him, his wife Cynthia was dressed in a devil costume, all in red. In fact, she was wearing a minimal one-piece swimsuit, cut high on her hips, with barely a half-inch of coverage between her legs. Barely was the key word. Her modesty was preserved, albeit marginally, by the red mesh tights underneath the swimsuit. In fact, they were just squares. Completing the ensemble was a short red jacket. She also had horns, the kind that blinked, like she and Margaret had. Margaret's husband Larry was returning from the restroom and, just for laughs, stealthily approached Cynthia from behind. Being tall, he was not a bad Count Dracula. He crept up behind her, baring his fake fangs and unzipping his cloak. Margaret grinned at what was about to happen, but Spencer didn't. He started to intervene when he realized what Larry was doing, but he was a second too late. Larry wrapped his hands around Cynthia's throat and pretended like he wanted to bite her. His fake fangs descended to the target. But before he could do so, Cynthia's eyes rolled back. She threw the chair back, and it fell. As it hit the floor, her stiffened legs flew up to the ceiling and she kicked the table. It wobbled and dropped the white wine glass right onto her crotch. She didn't make a sound. She just froze in place as the drink soaked into her suit. Cynthia looked like she had wet herself and didn't seem to be breathing. Larry, shocked, reached for her shoulders to help her up. But Spencer stopped him. He slid his hands under her armpits from the front and gently lifted her to her feet. Then he handed her to Margaret. "Please take her to the ladies' room." "God, I'm so sorry. What happened?" wailed Larry. "Sit down, buddy. Nothing terrible happened." The bartender came over, fixed the table, wiped it, the chair, and the floor. Larry went and got another round of drinks. When he returned, Spencer explained that Cynthia had always reacted this way to touches on her neck, even gentle ones. He suggested that it was probably due to some incident in her childhood, but never pushed the subject on her because she preferred not to talk about it. We don't tell you about it for obvious reasons. There's always some idiot who will do it as a joke. But we really should have told you guys, so it's totally my fault, Larry. I shouldn't have even let her sit with her back to the room, especially with so many vampires around. God, she scared me. Does that happen a lot? No, most of our longtime friends are aware of it. The last case was over 2 years ago. Did she see a doctor? A hypnotist? Not really. Just forget about it and don't discuss when she'll be back. Cynthia won't either. Just try not to stare at her soaked, intimate parts if you can. Well, I can try, I suppose. No one noticed the large, hooded executioner watching. She didn't recognize you? Anthony asked. I mean, you're a little black. I take that as a compliment, replied Damien calmly. But she was busy with other things. And I was the executioner that night anyway. A vest of artificial leather and a shoulder-length mask. And she was really scared? Damn right she was. One touch to her neck and she froze. I'd have frozen too, especially if I'd seen that wet camel's tail, Patty said. Of course you would. I could practically see it when it got wet. Lucky bastard. Don't you see, boys? We can use this against her. How? Think about it. She becomes helpless and silent if you touch her throat, and our Christmas party is in 6 weeks. But her husband will be there, Anthony pointed out. Of course he will. And Cynthia will be dancing and flirting, won't she? Damien said. She'll only be flirting with the management, not us workers. Okay, I've had more time to think this through than you guys have. You know they're removing the furniture from the auditorium to the storage room next to the bar to make room for dancing. And for the first hour, I'll be helping with the initial hype at the bar. Am I okay for now? Go on. So, imagine I slip an ecstasy pill into her glass to get her in the mood, and her old man half a roadie. Next, imagine I have a key to that side room in the corner. There will be a huge couch standing there. As much as I hate to admit it, Alex is our best dancer, despite being white. And he will be especially polite to her in the pre-party period. After a while, her husband starts to doze off. Alex convinces the snooty bitch to dance with him and leads her to that unlocked door. Party. The weeks flew by, and every Friday the Musketeers' plan was perfected. Silence implied consent. They would stop if she commanded it. There were many guests at the party. Cynthia was wearing a short, dark blue dress, and she was again braless. Her husband didn't know many of her co-workers and looked a little lost. But he was trying to put his best foot forward. It was the least he could do. After all, she was at his party. The first glass was complimentary, and Cynthia had a gin and tonic. Damien poured himself an E, and Spencer's Guinness came half a mouthful. They sat with 2 of Cynthia's friends from the office. There weren't many of them, but she looked hot, so a lot of male co-workers stopped by to introduce themselves to Spencer and to ask Cynthia to dance. Alex, who had been extremely polite to Cynthia for weeks now, sat alone at a table nearby, keeping his eyes on them. Anthony and Patty were farther away. They weren't drinking too much and discussing their purpose. There's plenty of braless talent here tonight, Patty said. In Cin's case, it'll be easier for us to keep her clean. Damien said we shouldn't leave any marks on her clothes. The initial commotion at the bar settled down and Damien joined them. How does she look? She's done a lot of dancing already, once with her husband and a lot with everyone else who invited her. Well, managers and senior office staff anyway. There's been the usual Christmas kissing and flirting. Nobody really likes her much, but the Christmas party is the only time they can rub her ass without getting punched in the face. Okay. Has Alex made a move yet? No, but she's seen him. Good. He needs to feign nervousness, like he's getting ready to ask her, considering she's a goddess and he's a lowly employee. Her old man is cool with the flirting and caressing. I got the impression he enjoys watching, though he doesn't look particularly tired. That's normal. We don't want him to fall asleep. If he's still frisky when we're ready, I'll slip him the other half of the pill. The band played a few slow songs. Their asses were pawed, their breasts casually touched and whispered in their ears. Then they took a break. When they were ready to play again, the format was a couple fast songs to get everyone dancing again, then more and more slow tunes as the lights would go down. "Just one dance, Spence?" Cynthia asked. "You don't like me? Everyone else has already spun me. I wouldn't be surprised if you found handprints on my buttocks." "Sorry, baby, I'm a little tired." "Oh, no. I was hoping you'd jump on my bones today. I really need to be well taken care of." "I'm sure I'll shake it off, but I like watching you get pawed, and I'll finish this pint. Do you want another?" "Not yet, no. The two guys I danced with bought me some. As a reward, they rubbed my ass. I never allow that at work, but they know it's okay at a party." Now it was just the couple sitting at the table. While Cynthia danced, the other couple had slipped away, in their words, for circulation. In fact, they were sick of her flirting and outbursts. The band resumed their performance with a fast number. As the second song began at a faster tempo, Alex suddenly appeared. "May I have Mrs. Norton for a dance? Mr. Norton?" "No problem," Spencer replied. From Cynthia's husband's reaction, it was hard to refuse him. It was a very polite request after all. Alex took her hand and led her to the floor. Cynthia soon discovered that he was an excellent dancer, but as aroused as she was, she didn't think he was entitled to caresses. After all, he was just a worker on the shop floor and she had her own standards. She enjoyed the next number, and then the slow one began. "One more, please?" She smiled and felt herself warming to him. He was trying really hard and really behaving himself. He wasn't trying to touch her inappropriately, and he had no way of knowing she was feeling sexy. "Very good." Spencer sat back in his chair and took a deep breath to clear his head. "Excuse me, sir?" It was the black-clad bartender again. "Someone ordered this Guinness." He set it down in front of Spencer. "But there's been a misunderstanding, and he doesn't want it. I remembered it's your drink, and it was just drawn. It's a shame to throw it away." "Oh, thank you." "You're welcome. It was our mistake." Cynthia was surprised to find herself having a good time and enjoying herself immensely. The next dance was a waltz. Alex was gaining confidence, for he didn't ask but simply pressed her against him. He smelled pleasant, and she started to get even more aroused. Of course, she didn't really like him. Cynthia's left hand rested on his shoulder and pulled him closer. They were almost cheek to cheek, and she could feel him breathing in her ear. This had better be his last dance. Maybe he and Spencer would be leaving soon. She couldn't wait for him to be with her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this horny. And when the dance was over, she'd probably kiss this guy in gratitude, just on the cheek. Alex maneuvered Cynthia until her back was against the door to the store. It was ajar, and he guessed that Patty and Damien were waiting in the dark. He looked around. There were no other dancers on this side. Those that were nearby were completely absorbed in each other. Then Anthony came up behind her and put his arms around her neck. His thumb and forefinger dug into her. She froze, turned white, and dropped her hands. Alex backed away from the dancers and watched Cynthia move away from him. Her heels slid across the floor. One of her shoes came off. The door swung open and Anthony dragged their prize inside. She remained standing still, even when the pressure eased a little. On the dance floor, Alex picked up her shoe. Then he waited a moment, looking around. When it was clear that no one had noticed anything, he stepped inside, and Damien slipped back out and headed over to the napping Spencer. "You don't look well, sir. Better come with me. The cold water will do you good." He helped him to the restroom, led him to the farthest stall, and sat him down, leaning back in his chair. Spencer closed his eyes and went limp. Damien stepped out of the stall and checked that it was empty. He closed the door, jumped up, bent down, and managed to lock it. Then stepped back and went to the closed party. The lights in the storeroom were not turned on until all 4 musketeers were in the hall. "Listen." Damien turned to Cynthia, holding the back of her head. You told us you wanted to fulfill your fantasy tonight, remember? His thumb and forefinger pressed against her ears and made her nod. We're reasonable men and realize that ladies sometimes regret what they promised. So, here's the deal. We want to have a good time with you. When you're satisfied, we'll return you to your husband. But if at any point you change your mind, tell us, and we'll stop, okay? Another nod followed. Okay, then let's get your clothes off. He turned her around for a kiss, experimenting with how gently he could hold her neck so she wouldn't come to life. It turned out that once she was under him, the light pressure was enough. Her clothes were neatly folded and spread out on the chair. Once she was naked except for her stockings, everyone saw that Damien had been right. The other three musketeers were already naked. Patty sat on the back of the sofa and Cynthia leaned against it, keeping her feet on the floor, her thighs sticking out over the backrest. Now do well, don't complain. She nodded once more. We don't have much time, so we'll just fuck her quickly and be done. Last chance to say no. She didn't. This is the best pleasure you've ever had, right? Then they sat her down on the couch again. Damien gave her the rest of the wine and she swallowed it greedily. They dressed her. Okay, said Damien. You all know the plan. Patty and Anthony, go back to your table. I'll have 4 beers and join you. Alex, escort your dance partner out. If hubby's still swamped, take her to the ladies' room. He turned to Cynthia and removed his belt. You go to the ladies and fix your makeup, then find your husband and take him home. Okay. She spoke for the first time. Alex, before you join us, find his Guinness and get rid of it, and then we'll sit back and see what happens. And what happened was that everything went right. Cynthia found a male colleague to get Spencer out of the gentleman's, and they went home. The result. Monday morning, all 4 musketeers were nervous. If she complained, management might believe her. They could be out of a job, or worse. During lunch in the mess hall, they discussed whether a gangbang with a goddess was worth the risk. It was. The police hadn't come over the weekend, so they were quietly hopeful. Cynthia walked in with a few of her office co-workers. She glanced at them as she took a table with her friends, then got up and walked over to them, 4 sharp breaths. I have something to tell you guys. They were dumbfounded. What? Damien asked. First of all, I'll be working late on Friday and I want you guys to get the key to the room at the store again.